welcome and introduce our speaker for this session, Kapil. Kapil Varma is a seasoned product and business leader with 22 years of global experience across the United States, India, and the Middle East. Kapil has driven product-led growth in sectors like e-commerce, travel, food tech, and financial services, holding key roles at organizations like Namshi, Make My Trip, Amazon, Swiggy, and Adobe. A former McKinsey consultant and Capital One financial professional, Kapil holds a computer science degree from IIT Delhi and an MBA from MIT Sloan. So pleased to have you join us this morning, Kapil.
Thank you, Harleen.
I hope you are able to see the results of the poll on your screen.
Yes, I can see the results. I'm just going through them.
Yeah, okay, great.
Cool. So yeah, I think that gives me a good idea of the audience. So thank you guys for filling it out. Harleen, are we good to go?
Yes, we're good to go. The session is...
Okay, great. All right. So can I just share my screen?
Sorry, Kapil, shall I just end the poll so that everyone can view the...
Sorry. Yes, you can end the poll now, Harleen.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Sorry, back to you. Okay, I'm gonna request everyone to make sure you guys are on mute so there's no disruptions during the session. Right? Thank you. Back to you, Kapil.
Okay, great. So I'll just share my screen, Harleen. All right. So good morning, everyone. Good morning this Saturday morning. Thanks for taking time out over the weekend. So the focus of today's workshop is to talk about GenAI and how it is transforming product management, and how PMs are actually using GenAI in their day-to-day activities. There's a fundamental shift that is actually happening in how we work, which is driven by GenAI, and product management is no exception. So I'm calling it Product Management V2, which is powered by GenAI. Just a few things before we start. So today's workshop is a mix of theory and application. I would say more of application. So we'll definitely need your participation. So we'll need you to be signed in to ChatGPT or Google Gemini. So you can use one of those models in your product exercises. Hopefully, you saw the email and you've already done that. The second thing is, we have a large group, so it would not be possible for all of you to speak at the same time. So for the product exercises, what we'll do is we'll invite you to share your observations in the chat window. And in some cases, we might call upon you to unmute yourself and speak as well. Other than that, please stay on mute so that there is less distraction in the session. And the third thing is, I would say that GenAI is such a vast and evolving field. There's so much to cover. So this is just my take on GenAI and what's actually happening in this field. It is by no ways complete. Also, this is not supposed to be a very technical dive deep. That is not the objective of today's session. This is more about what GenAI is, how it works, and how you can use it, right? So it is not meant to be a very technical, in-depth dive deep into GenAI. But at the same time, I'm sure all of you actually have been using GenAI, one of these tools. So please do keep on sharing your observations with the whole group as we go through the workshop so that everybody can benefit from that. Okay. Hope that sounds good. So let's start. So this is the agenda that I actually have for today. So we'll just cover GenAI at a high level, at a 30,000 feet level. Then we'll talk about LLMs and what they are and how they work. Then the third part is, which is the meat of the workshop, which is how you can use GenAI in product management. And then we'll actually wrap it up with looking ahead at the future and some key trends. And then I'll share some useful resources with you all. Okay. So let's talk about the first one, right? Which is, what is GenAI? So GenAI is a type of AI. First of all, it is a type of AI that can help you generate content, right? The content can be text, it can be images, it can be video. But the way it differs from traditional ML, machine learning, is it can generate content, whereas traditional ML focuses on making predictions or classifications. Right? You must have seen traditional ML in terms of like, email spam detection, or a bank using machine learning to like, make a decision on loan approval or prediction or ranking. And there are different types of machine learning: supervised learning, unsupervised learning. There are various techniques. But the way GenAI differs from traditional ML is actually it generates content as opposed to just making a prediction, right? And if you look at the broader AI landscape, this is where GenAI fits in, right? So you have artificial intelligence, which is basically about like, making machines as smart as humans, which is very, very broad field. And within that, you have machine learning, which is about understanding like, patterns in data and making predictions and classifications without any explicit programming. And then within that, you have deep learning, which is inspired by, human brain and neurons and how they work and the neural network. And so generative AI is actually a type of deep learning, machine learning technique, right? So I just want to kind of give you a very high level view of what is GenAI and how it fits and how it is different from the traditional machine learning that you might have seen. And so what is the big deal this time, right? So first of all, if you look at this chart shows you how fast ChatGPT, which was launched in November of 2022, how fast it reached 100 million users, right? So it took only 2 months for ChatGPT to reach that milestone. Whereas if you look at the other popular apps like Instagram took 30 months, Spotify 55 months, Uber 70 months, right? So at that time, it was the fastest to reach 100 million users, monthly active users, right? And since then, I think the record actually has been broken by Threads from Meta. But at that time, it was the fastest app to reach that milestone, right? And if you look at where GenAI is and in the whole AI sort of revolution, right? If you look at the major eras in technology, going all the way back to 1980s, this started with the PC era, where you have the IBM Windows PC and Apple, and it basically brought computing to everybody's home, right? From the universities. And then you had the internet era, where like, you could access information, commerce, all of that enabled online. And then you had the smartphone era, where the smartphones really moved from corporate boardroom setting to like, and with the introduction of iPhone. And then you have cloud starting from 2000, where computing and storage moved to cloud over the internet, as opposed to like, on-premise local, and really like, help scalability and cost efficiency in the IT infrastructure. And where we are is currently in the AI era, right? And it's a coming together of a lot of trends in terms of lots and lots of data being available, better computing, more computing power. It's a coming together of convergence of all of those trends, which is resulting in this AI revolution, right? And things are actually moving at a breakneck speed, as you all know, right? So there are, of course, these big tech players, and it all started with the ChatGPT launch in November of 2022. And then, of course, had like, Microsoft, Meta, and Google follow up with their own models. Microsoft, of course, as you know, actually is in collaboration with OpenAI, and they've been using GPT in their various products and co-pilots. And since then, there has been like, a rush of releases and innovations. Like every week, every month, there is actually something new happening. And everybody, all of these major tech companies are actually in a race to build a better, bigger, cheaper version of the model, right? And as of like last month now, May, OpenAI released GPT-4o, which we'll look at, and Google released Gemini 1.5 Pro, as well as some of their small language models as well. So things are moving at such a vast like speed, and this has resulted in this plethora of AI tools. I mean, this is just one market map from Sequoia that you can see. There's so many AI tools out there. It's hard to keep track. There are, of course, consumer tools like companions and assistants. Then there are enterprise tools in the form of co-pilots, and then you have like other tools as well. So it's just like the market is actually changing a lot and changing very, very fast. Right? So rapid pace of innovation. It's hard to keep track. Actually, funny enough, there are actually these websites. So this is just one example. You can check it out. There's an AI for that. That's the name of the website. So you can use this website to kind of keep track of the different AI applications and tools which are there. And they also have like a nice timeline view, so you can see that what were the major releases and capabilities introduced in May and April and so on and so forth. So as you can see, right now it actually has more than 12,000 AI applications which are listed on this website, right? So things are moving fast and things are moving across formats as well, right? So GenAI is not just about text-based input and text-based output, right? Now you can do text to text, you can have text to images, you can generate images, as you all know, you can generate videos, you can generate audio and even code, right? And here is the landscape in terms of the most common tools and models, right? So you have the GPT and the Gemini from OpenAI and Google. Then for image, you have Dolly and Midjourney. OpenAI released Sora, I think, like earlier this year for video generation. I'll show you that example in the next slide. And since then, like Google actually has released Veo recently, and there's Runway, sorry, that's the name of the company, which also like does text to video, and a bunch of these other tools as well, right? So it is going across formats, not just text to text, right? And here is an example of Sora. So this is one example where you actually can give a prompt, a text-based prompt, and it generates a super realistic video, which actually captures the entire scene from multiple angles. You have multiple characters, you have different movements which are captured in the video, all from this prompt which you see on the left. That's all the model actually takes and generates this video. So I'm just going to play it a little bit for you so that you get an idea. Some of you might have seen it already. So I'm just going to play it and let me know if you can actually see the video. Harleen, if you can just let me know.
The video is playing, Kapil. Yes.
Okay. There might be a bit of a lag, guys, just because of screen sharing. But as you can see, if you look at the prompt and the video on the right, this was all generated from the prompt. And if you look at, the lighting, the background image, the characters moving, the main character walking down the street, this is the output from this model called Sora from OpenAI. And you can check it out. You can just go to the web page and you can see like a lot of other sample videos that they have put up as well. So it's pretty remarkable, right? How many of you actually have seen this video or saw the announcement? Just a quick, in chat window, yes, no, if you're familiar. Okay. So there's a mix. Some of you saw the announcement, some of you did not. Since then, Google recently also has released their text to video model recently, and there are other independent companies as well, right? And same thing is actually happening in music, where you can use text to generate music. There's a company called Suno.com, where you can generate all kinds of music through the prompt as well. Okay, so I'll move forward. So we just talked about GenAI and actually what's happening in this space, right? So let's talk about, okay, what are large language models, like LLMs, what they call, right? And what they are and how they work. So what are LLMs and how are they same as GenAI? Are they different? Like, what are those, right? So LLMs are a form of GenAI, right? So LLM stands for large language model. And they also generate content. They generate content based on the input given to them. So hence they are a form of GenAI, right? So the keyword here is large, guys, right? So they're trained on vast amounts of data. So if you look at all of internet in terms of web pages, books, research papers, articles, all of that actually has been thrown in, and these models actually have been trained on vast amounts of data. As per estimates, GPT was trained on 45 terabytes of data, right? Which is huge. Then these models are huge. There's something called parameters, which I'll talk about. It's basically how dense your neural network is. And so GPT, for example, GPT-4 uses 1.76 trillion, that's trillion with a T, number of parameters, right? And I think this was 10 times the number of parameters in the previous version of GPT, right? So they're using more parameters, and because of that, they're becoming more dense and better at output and reasoning and so on and so forth. And the third thing is the concept of context window, right? Which is how much input, how much context you can give to the model as a context, for it to generate the output, or for it to for it to perform the task that you're given. And so Google Gemini, the latest one, actually has a context window of 1 million tokens. And just to give you an idea, I think GPT actually, the previous version actually has 128,000 tokens rather, right? So really 8x, 9x sort of step function change in terms of the context window, right? And you might ask, what is a token, right? So token is basically, think of a word actually having multiple tokens. Think of it as a part of a word. And typically you have 1.3 tokens per word. So that means you can give Gemini 1 million tokens, which is equivalent of, let's say, 1 hour of video. You can ask it to summarize 1 hour of video, or you can give it 11 hours of audio, and you can ask it to generate synthesis based on that, right? So these models are large, and they're becoming larger. And how do they actually work is they're based on neural network architecture, as I mentioned earlier, right? So like I said, this is inspired by the structure of human brains and neurons. And I would not go into the depths. At a high level, a neural network basically has multiple layers of these neurons or nodes. And you have the input layer, and then you have several middle layers called the hidden layers. And then you have the output layer, right? And basically it processes input, and each of these nodes in the neural network does a certain processing of the input, applies certain weights, and uses an activation function to pass the input to the next node and to the next node. And that's how it generates the output, right? So it's a form of deep learning technique, which is used by GenAI as well. And large language models, they work by predicting the next word, right? So if you give it a sentence, my favorite food is a, and it will actually finish the sentence by typing the word bagel, right? And it has actually learned by looking at all kinds of data, text, sentences, to predict the most common or the word with the highest probability, right? And it actually takes the same sentence and it trains itself by breaking the sentence into multiple parts. But as you can see, all it is doing is predicting the next word in the sentence, right? And that's how it is actually working, and that's how it is generating the output for you, right? And yeah, so basically that's how it works. You feed an input which is an incomplete sentence. My favorite food is a bagel with cream, and it will finish the sentence with adding the word cheese to it, right? So at a very high level, that's how they work. And if you talk about it, how they are developed, they're basically developed. There are three main stages to developing a large language model, right? The first one is called pre-training. So this is when you throw vast amounts of data at the model, and the model learns grammar, text. It learns, acquires knowledge of the world, right? So you can give it books, web pages, articles, papers, all kind of stuff, right? So it becomes a very good sentence completer. The output of this stage is base model. And at this stage, the base model is basically, it can complete your sentence, or it can give you the next sentence or the next word, right? And this is the most expensive stage of the training of large language models, right? But it has not really become smart in terms of responding to your instructions and the questions that you ask. Like if you think about it, whenever you use ChatGPT or Gemini, you ask a question, it responds to the question, or it responds to the task that you have given. But if all it is doing is just completing the sentence, how does it do that, right? And that's where the next stage comes in, where the model becomes an assistant and intelligent enough to respond to a specific instruction given to it, right? And you do that, you basically have a lot of labeled instruction response data. So think of it as Q&A, question, answer, and you give a lot of that sample data to this model, and it actually learns how to respond to specific questions and instructions. And this is what is called a fine-tuned model, right? And then the last step is which is called reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, which basically is about tweaking the model based on human input, right? So technically it uses a reward model, and basically like humans are evaluating the model output, and they're saying that, hey, this output is good, this output is not so good. And based on that feedback, the model output becomes closer to what humans want, right? And then it is ready to deploy. So those are three main stages in terms of how the model is developed. The first stage, I think, is like I said, is the most cumbersome, most expensive in terms of computing time, and fine tuning is something which you can do more often. It is less expensive. But at the same time, if you talk about enterprises, they have a lot of their own proprietary data and context. And that's where things like RAG come in, where enterprises use retrieval augmented generation, which is you're giving the models additional data. This pre-trained, fine-tuned model that you have from ChatGPT or an open source model like Claude, you're taking that model and you're giving it some additional context which is specific to your company. And then the model generates output or answers questions for your specific context, right? So that's at a high level. I just want to give you an intuition of what these models are and how they are actually developed, so that you understand the inner workings of the model, at least at a high level. And if you think of ChatGPT, what does the word GPT stand for, right? So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, right? And now probably you can understand what each of these terms means. So generative is all about it generates new content, right? Pre-trained means, as I mentioned in the last slide, it is pre-trained on vast amounts of data, right? And then the transformer is, I would not cover it, but it's basically architecture of neural network, which these large language models use. So it's a transformer architecture which is used in these large language models, and that's what the T stands for, right? So, and these models are becoming more advanced by the day. Since 2022, when all it would do is generate text and it would take only text as an input, these models are becoming multimodal, and they're becoming more and more advanced and more intelligent and better at reasoning, right? And so here is the latest sort of release from Google. It's not really a release, it's still under development, but basically this is Google's vision on the AI assistant and what it can do. And just take a note of how the model is able to take input from in different sources in terms of voice, in terms of computer vision, and how it can reason across a various variety of use cases. So I'm just going to play the video for a few minutes so you can see. And Harleen, just let me know if you can hear the sound as well.
Okay, let's do some tests. Tell me when you see something that makes sound.
I see a speaker, which makes sound.
What is that part of the speaker called?
That is the tweeter. It produces high-frequency sounds.
Give me a creative alliteration about these.
Creative crayons color cheerfully. They certainly craft colorful creations.
What does that part of the code do?
This code defines encryption and decryption functions. It seems to use AES-CBC encryption to encode and decode data based on a key and an initialization vector, IV.
That's right. What neighborhood do you think I'm in?
This appears to be the King's Cross area of London. It is known for its railway station and transportation connections.
Do you remember where you saw my glasses?
Yes, I do. Your glasses were on the desk near a red apple.
What can I add here to make this system faster?
Adding a cache between the server and database could improve speed.
What does this remind you of?
Schrodinger's cat.
All right, give me a band name for this duo.
Golden stripes.
Nice. Thanks, Gemini.
So what do you think, guys? I don't know how many of you actually have seen this video, but what was the coolest part for you, or what they showed, what they demoed?
I think it felt so
Finding the
natural, right?
glasses.
Yeah, finding the glasses and getting
Finding the
so natural
glasses?
with
Yeah.
getting so natural with that conversation. That was cool.
Sorry, I heard finding the glasses, and what was somebody else saying?
Yeah, it's Anup here. So I was saying it was so naturally communicated with a machine. It didn't feel like it was a machine when the AI was speaking. Finding those glasses.
Very natural way of speaking, I think, like communicating. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Your audio is not very clear. The code reading as well as finding the glasses. Yeah, I think finding the glasses was very cool because like it definitely has memory as well, right? So it actually remembered that there was actually an apple and glasses sitting on the table and remembered that, and it then was able to answer the question. And I think if you look at the spectrum, going from like, very creative outputs in terms of alliterations and coming up with the name to very technical, like, adding a cache to improve the performance in the system diagram. I think just the whole spectrum of like, what it can understand and reason is pretty remarkable.
And apart
Cool.
from apart from the glasses, Kapil, there was something else for the product managers. Like we could get the technicalities of a technical diagram in a seconds, and we could add our views generated from the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. It also like, she just pointed the phone at the screen, at the monitor, which actually had the code. And actually it was able to analyze the code and understand like, what it does. And then the system diagram that you saw, which actually had like, various inputs databases, it was able to say that like, you can add a cache to improve the performance of the system as well.
That was super.
So, yeah. So anyways, I mean, that's basically the next section. We'll talk more about how you can use it in your product management, like, day to day, which is actually the next section, right? So, and this is where, we're going to focus probably the next, 45 minutes or so in this section. And this is where I need your participation, right? So everybody should be ready with GPT and Gemini on your laptops, on your phone, whatever, and be ready to go. And I want your participation. What we're going to do is we're going to do a bunch of exercises, and we're going to see how you can use generative AI in your day-to-day in product management, right? So hopefully you can still see my screen, right? You can see the product lifecycle slide.
Yes.
Okay, great. So at a very high level, and a lot of you would be familiar with this, these are the 4 stages of life cycle of the product. First of all, you start with discovery, where you're working on identifying the problem and coming up with solutions to the problem. The next stage is what I call planning, where once you're clear about which problem, which solution, you plan, you create a vision, you plan a roadmap, you prioritize the roadmap, you align various stakeholders. And then comes the execution stage, where you're, of course, creating PRDs, working with tech teams, design teams, and building the product and shipping it out. And the last is launch and iterate, where you take the product to market, launch it, do testing, analyze the results, and the cycle sort of repeats, right? So classic sort of product life cycle. So we'll start with the first one, which is discovery. And within discovery, like, again, you have various stages, right? So quickly covering those, empathize, ideate, validate, define, and competition. And discovery, guys, is basically about finding the right problem statement, the problem statement that is worth solving, and the right solution. So problem worth solving and the solution worth implementing is basically the output of the discovery stage, right? So you start with empathize, like where you actually like, going and meeting customers and looking at various sources to understand their needs and pain points, right? I call this the empathize stage. And then you have ideate. Once you have identified the pain points, you come up with a few hypotheses on what the solutions could be to solve these pain points. Then you do validation. You test the solution, you create maybe prototypes and test the solution with customers. So validate the hypothesis. And then based on that refinement, create a final sort of solution definition very crisply. What is the product and what value it will provide? And then you also do competitive sort of like research in this space. You're looking at the various competition and how your product will differentiate itself from the competition. Correct. And then, here are the various techniques used, from, doing customer interviews, focus groups, to creating prototypes, to doing competitor landscape and SWOT analysis, right? I think you must have come across some of these definitely, right? So what we'll do is, we'll go through each of these sort of 4 or 5 stages, and we'll see how we can use one of these large language models in assisting us. Okay. So what we're going to do is I will share one example with you. Okay. So this is an example that I have worked on myself, using ChatGPT. I'll also give you one product problem that you guys will work on, which is going to be different from this. And then you will tell me as we go along in terms of what your findings are using ChatGPT or Gemini. Okay. So this is a product problem that I had worked on. Sorry, let me just do a slideshow again, I think. Okay, you can still see the screen? Yeah, good. Can somebody just confirm?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So this is the problem that I have worked on. So I basically said that if I'm a product manager working in a global travel company, and I did work for a travel company earlier, let's say that I want to reimagine the travel booking experience for Gen Z, basically people born between 96 to 2010. So the younger generation, their needs might be different, right? How they travel, what is important to them, not might be, it's actually different, right? So if I want to reimagine the travel booking experience for Gen Z travelers, that's the problem that I said I'm going to work on, right? And so the first step is understanding the pain points of these Gen Z travelers. Okay. So of course, I can do my primary research, but ChatGPT also has a vast amount of knowledge in terms of it has read all of these articles and books, etc. So I said, okay, I asked ChatGPT, and this is the prompt that I gave. I said, list down the top 10 pain points that Gen Z travelers have when it comes to current travel booking experience. Output it as a numbered list with one-line summary of each. Right. So this is the prompt that I gave ChatGPT. And this is what it generated, right? So as I requested, it did generate 10 different pain points, ranging from information overload, lack of personalization, budget constraints, transparency issues, and so on and so forth. Sorry, somebody has a question? Okay. If you don't have a question, I'll request you to be on mute. So these are the top 10 pain points it generated from the knowledge that it has acquired, right? And some of these are, I would say, specific to Gen Z. Some of these are not so specific to Gen Z, right? So there are a lot of generic pain points like information overload or lack of personalization. This is something that everybody struggles with when it comes to travel booking, right? But the ones which are specific to Gen Z or more specific or more relevant to Gen Z is probably these three, right? You have budget constraints, typically these are people earlier in their career, or some of them might be students, not a lot of money. And so budget is definitely a concern. I think this generation also cares for not just any travel or, very touristic stuff, but authentic and unique experiences. I think that's another sort of characteristic of the generation. So it listed that. And then, this generation, of course, grew on social media, right? So they get a lot of their inspiration from social media in terms of where to travel, how to travel. So I picked these sort of 3 pain points, and I said, let's actually build a product which is focused on solving for these 3 pain points. Okay. So what I want to do next is validate these pain points, right? So what I can do is I can do a survey. So I can send out a survey to Gen Z travelers and say that, just get some more quantitative information. And I can also do a focus group where I can get qualitative information from the customers in terms of what are their needs and pain points when it comes to these 3 areas, budget, unique experiences, and social sharing and validation, right? So I asked ChatGPT for both of these, right? And again, here are the prompts that you see at the top that I gave. And it did generate like a pretty nice survey for me, as well as a interview guide, which I can use in the focus group, right? And as you can see from the underlines, it actually did cover those 3 specific pain points that I asked it to focus on. Now, I'm not saying that this is the final output. I think one theme you would see is, I think the output from ChatGPT or Gemini is a starting point, but you as the product manager have to put on your thinking hat and creative hat, and then use that as a starting point to improve the output as well, right? But it does really help a lot from an overall productivity perspective. Okay, so that was my first step that I took with that problem statement. Now here is the problem statement that you guys will work on, right? So just memorize this. This is what you'll be spending your time over the next 45 minutes on, right? So now we're going to go the other side of the spectrum, the age spectrum. So let's say you want to build something for senior citizens, right? And you're an entrepreneur and you want to build a new product offering a service for senior citizens. And you're currently in the customer discovery phase. At a very early stage, you do not have an idea of what to build, how to build it. We're just trying to understand this segment a little better. So let's start by understanding the pain points of this segment first. So I wanted to write a clear prompt for understanding the pain point. Okay. And what we're going to do is we'll also get a little comparison of the 2 models. Okay. So we'll use, let's say, ChatGPT and Gemini, the 2 most popular models in generating the output. What I would say is I want half of you to use ChatGPT. I want the other half of you to use Gemini. And, we can do this, which is if your date of birth falls on an even date, use ChatGPT. And if it falls on an odd date, then use Gemini. Okay. So clear in terms of what you need to do? If you can just again type in the chat window and just let me know. Are we clear? Okay, great. So go ahead. And then after you're done, I want you to kind of type in the chat window and tell me what do you think of the output? Okay, let's just take a minute or so to do this. And if you're done doing this and looking at the output, feel free to start typing in the chat window. Any thoughts from anyone so far? Okay, so I don't want you to paste the entire output in the chat window because it's probably would not be possible to read through all of it. But just read through the output yourself and tell me what do you think. Do you think it's right? Do you think it's actually hitting the right pain points? In general, what do you think of the output? And again, please type your responses in the chat window. It was able to clearly identify the segment. Okay. Few responses matches to current situation. Okay. The response was matching and realistic. Okay. Good. So I think a lot of you actually felt that it was able to understand the segment, and the responses it gave were realistic. Like you can see that maybe the senior citizens are actually facing those issues, right? So that's good. And that's because it actually has so much knowledge. Probably it actually has read research reports on senior citizens that somebody actually had done. So that's why it's able to understand a very nuanced sort of question around the specific segment and what are the pain points, right? So, but as somebody also mentioned, Aviral mentioned, and I also had the same feeling, in some cases, some of these pain points are generic, maybe related to travel, for example, overall, but not specific to Gen Z in my case. So I'll have to kind of comb through the output and pick the relevant pain points. Okay, so the next thing that I want you guys to do is what I have done is I actually have collated some dummy data. Let's say that you actually have done a research in this segment, and there is actually some dummy data that I have created, and you can use dummy data to summarize the output of the research. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do. So Harleen, if you can just share the link to the Word document, the Google Docs document, which actually has the raw notes from the user research. And I want you to kind of take that raw data, raw notes, and I want you to use ChatGPT or Gemini to summarize into the top 10 insights from this research and ask it to also write 1 or 2 verbatim user feedback to support the insight. Okay, so you're going to do it in 2 steps. First of all, explain the task to the large language model. Write a prompt first in terms of what you want it to do, and then copy and paste the notes from this document into the chat window and ask it to summarize. And I think Harleen actually has shared the link with you. Everybody should be able to access this Google Docs document. Let me know if you can't. Is the exercise clear in terms of what you need to do?
Could you repeat once, Kapil?
Sorry, somebody has a question?
Yeah, could you just repeat the activity?
It's there on the slide. So basically, there is a document that actually has Harleen has shared the link to. This actually has the raw notes from the user research that we have done. This is dummy data. I want you to use ChatGPT or Gemini to summarize the takeaways from this research. So the link to the document, which actually has the user research, it's in the chat window shared by Harleen. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, Kapil, yeah.
Guys, are you able to see my slide?
Kapil, the slide is visible. There's just a little box on the left corner. Not a
Oh,
little
that's
box.
because I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at the chat window. Now, Harleen,
Okay,
do you
all
see
right.
it now?
No, now I can't. Okay.
Yeah,
Now
I think
the
probably
slide
when
is
I open the chat window, that's when it probably blocks the view.
of course. Got it.
Does somebody have a question, guys? Again, request you to be on mute if you don't have a question. So what I'll do is I'll reduce the chat window size so that everybody can see the exercise. So how it is going, guys? Are you able to get the insights? Okay.
Yes,
So
Kapil.
Bopana says it was able to summarize the findings. Okay. Bopana, can I also ask you to write the prompt that you used? Just copy and paste the prompt. And maybe if a few other people can also do the same, just tell us the prompt that you used in ChatGPT or Gemini to summarize the research. Because we're going to focus a lot on how to write more effective prompts. So you can also see in the chat window, guys, everybody is writing the prompt that they use. Comprehend the user research data. Okay. Summarize the key takeaways. Good. Good. So, you're writing the prompts and it's able to then generate the output as per what you wanted, which is good. And we'll talk about how you can actually make these prompts even more clear and more effective and to further improve the output as well. But this is a good start, guys. Okay. So now if somebody can summarize, what are the few pain points that it was able to synthesize from the research? I just want 1 or 2 people to just summarize in the chat window. Okay, so there we have it. So we have user-friendly healthcare management apps, digital literacy, community engagement, internet connectivity. Okay, use transportation connection. Okay, so as you can see from some of the answers that people are sharing in the chat window, there is commonality, right? So maybe some people are using Gemini, some people are using ChatGPT, but you see commonality in the themes, right? In terms of healthcare, technology usage and struggle with it, social and emotional sort of loneliness and well-being, financial security, safety and security, mobility, right? And by the way, the dummy data that I shared with you actually has interview notes from rural senior citizens as well as urban. So maybe, not right now, but maybe later on, you can also ask it to summarize what are the pain points which are different between the 2 segments. And it can also, give you that. So, but anyways, that's good. So you were able to summarize, and I do see a lot of similarity in the pain points being reported by you guys. So as next step, what I want you to do is what we're going to do is we're going to focus on one of these pain points or a few of these pain points and create a solution, which is the next step. So I want you to use ChatGPT to brainstorm possible product solutions, right? And don't start right now. I'll tell you when to start. But this is an example from the Gen Z travel segment, right? So this is the prompt that I wrote. I said that, remember those 3 pain points, social sharing, validation, unique and authentic travel experiences, and budget-friendly travel. So I said that, create a product concept based on those 3 pain points, right? And this is what it did, right? So create a short product concept. To also give it a name, which I kind of like, Wander Well. So, wandering and traveling, but traveling in a nice way, in a better way. Wander Well. Your passport to affordable adventure and authentic experiences, right? And created a short product concept. And as you can see, it did incorporate some of those unique things which Gen Z cares about, right? Affordable, unique, social validation, and so on and so forth, right? So now for your exercise, by the way, before I do that, now this is what it created. One of the things you can do is you can use ChatGPT or Gemini to play the role of the thought partner. And you can even ask it to identify risks early on. So it has come up with an idea. Then you can pose the question back to the large language model to say that, what are the possible risks that you see? Just play devil's advocate and help me identify the risks so that you're actually aware of those risks. So it not only generates the output for you, but can also be a thought partner and actually help you think through issues and risk mitigation strategies as well. Okay. So now you're going to do the same thing with senior citizens. Okay. And I want you to pick on this particular pain point, right? This is actually a pain point that a lot of you also reported, right? Which is social isolation and loneliness, right? And we all know that, senior citizens do struggle with it. So there's a desire for more social interaction, community events, and feeling of isolation, especially after they lose their spouse, for example, right? So this is actually a significant pain point, came through the research very clearly. For this example, let's say that this is the problem statement that you're going to work on. And I want you to kind of write or ask the large language model to come up with a product concept note, which is going to be focused on solving for this pain point on the left. Okay. So again, write a prompt and look at the output and tell us in the chat window what you think. Okay. Any observations so far from any of you? And again, you can copy and paste the prompt that you used. And then maybe some of you can also paste the output it generated. Erlin, am I audible? I hope that people can hear me. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I see some of the prompts being shared by you guys. So what you want to do is you want to ask ChatGPT or Gemini to say that this is the pain point I want to focus on, which is around social isolation and loneliness for the senior citizens, and ask it to come up with 1 or 2 broad ideas that you can work on. Companionship hub for senior citizens, community engagement programs, okay, home visit programs, right? So these are all the good ideas in terms of what you can build or what you can launch out there to solve for this pain point. So in the interest of time and to kind of keep things simple, I want you to imagine that you're building a new social networking app and community site for senior citizens in India. Okay, you want to solve for this pain point, and think of it as a Facebook or an Instagram for senior citizens. Okay, so as a product manager, you have identified that this is the app that I want to build, and that's what you're going to be working on in the next stages of the product lifecycle. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go to the next step, which is now actually I have an example. So this is what I also asked ChatGPT to do for the senior citizen segment. And as you can see, it came up with this product concept for solving this pain point called Silver Circle, social engagement platform for seniors. Okay, so this is what we're going to pick on in the coming exercises. The next step is validating this product concept that you have identified, that you have built, right? So again, you can use GPT or Gemini for that. So let's say that you want to build a prototype to validate this concept, right? So the first step is for you to think of the app and the consumer journey and the various screens. And you can ask these large language models to do that. And so here's an example for Wanderwell, which is the Gen Z travel solution that we identified. And I said that I wanted to create a basic screen flow and limit this to no more than 15 screens. And this is what it did, right? So you can see that there's a welcome screen, login screen, onboarding, and then there are various other screens like social feed screen, where the traveler can go and they can look at their feed, just like Facebook, Instagram feed, and they can get travel inspiration. So based on the product concept, based on the unique value proposition, it was able to kind of create a flow for you in terms of what that consumer journey would look like, right? And then as a next step, you can take this and you can even now create wireframes and designs. So there are tools out there which can actually help you create wireframes from text. So this is one example. It's called Wireframe Designer. It's actually a Figma plugin. And you can actually, and you can try it out. It's actually free. I mean, later on, you can search for this plugin in Figma, and you can actually have like a trial version. And you can just give it a prompt, just like ChatGPT, you can give it a prompt. And this is the prompt that I gave it. And I said that, hey, this is the product that I'm developing. I wanted to focus on the social features of this app for travelers, for Gen Z travelers. The name of the product is Wanderwell. And I asked it to create a wireframe for that social feed screen. Okay. So just based on the text prompt, this plugin was able to create this wireframe, right? So as you can see, there is this page, and you have at the top, you have these social media posts, somebody commenting about Eiffel Tower or Tokyo, and their pictures, they can be pictures as well. And then there are discovery based on customer reviews as the next section. And then there are some recommended experiences, specific destinations and specific experiences. And then there are also a place for you to kind of also share your travel experience and travel story as well. So basically, it was able to create this wireframe. I mean, this is not design, but this is just like a wireframe, a sketch, if you will, where you can take this and just look at it, visualize the experience yourself, and you can use it to validate, right? And all based on a prompt. And there are also other tools out there which can help you create full-fledged designs as well. And I'll share some of those tools with you at the very end, which you can use to then create prototypes and validate with the users. Okay, so this is an example. And then the next thing you can do is you can also use it to do competitive research, right? So in my example, I said that I wanted to create a list of competition with 3-4 key players and put together a SWOT analysis. SWOT is strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats for the various competitors, and also for my app that I'm building, right? So as you can see, it did identify the competitors, the correct competitors. These are sort of generic travel OTAs, Airbnb, Booking, Expedia. Did identify those and did put together a table, because I asked it to put the output in a tabular format, as you can see in the prompt. So it did put together a table of SWOT analysis, and it also did the same thing for the new app that I'm building, which is Wanderwell. right? So what are the strengths? That it is focused on Gen Z and solving for their unique needs. But the weakness is, for example, it's a new entrant, right, with limited brand recognition. And the opportunity is Gen Z actually has a lot of these unmet needs, which these horizontal travel OTAs cannot solve. And that's the opportunity for this app. So I think fairly accurate. I would say it's still a bit generic. And, I think this is where, like, you do your own research to make the output a little bit more specific. But I would say fairly, like, realistic and right in terms of how this app would compare with the existing competitors, right? And, you can also write it, ask it to write a positioning statement for this product. Because at this stage, what you're doing is you have a product concept in mind, and you are seeing how it will be positioned in the competitor space and how it will differentiate from the competitors, right? So you can also ask it to write a positioning statement for you as well to kind of give you more clarity. Okay. So in the interest of time, we'll just keep going. We would not do this exercise, but I mean, here is some of the other things, you can do. You can even give it a URL, a website link of the competitor, and you can ask it to summarize the benefits for you. So you can say that, hey, I'm going to be competing with Expedia, or I'm going to be competing with, Facebook when it comes to senior citizen. And then, you can also ask it to summarize what is the value proposition of those products. And the second thing you can also do is you can ask it to do market sizing, right? Now here, I wanted to be a little cautious because it sometimes, hallucinate and the model makes up things. So you might want to double check the market sizing estimates it comes up with and the assumption that it uses. But you can actually use it as a starting point to do market sizing for the segment that you're actually interested in building for. Okay. So that was the first sort of step, which is discovery. And, we saw that how you can use it to generate pain points, synthesize the pain points. You prioritize the pain points. It can help you generate product concept and even do things like, wireframes and designs for you to validate those pain points as well. And lastly, it can actually help you understand how you'll be positioned vis-a-vis the competition, right? So talking about the next one, which is planning, right? So as a first step, what you also want to do is you want to create a vision for the product, right? And vision is basically long-term, bold vision that you want to do in terms of where you are headed. So you can also use it as a brainstorming partner to come up with vision statements. So here is what I have done, right, with the Gen Z travel segment. And as you can see, this is the prompt that I gave. It said, give me 5 suggestions for what could be vision statements. This is the output it did. It did provide me. Like, yeah, but probably a little wordy, seems a bit generic. So then I did another iteration. I said, I like the number 5 vision. I said, give me more suggestions like this, but make it more impactful and bold, right? So then in the second iteration, it gave me some more suggestions, which sounded more like, the number 5 vision in the previous one, right? More related to that. And I did one more iteration. I said that make the vision statement a short phrase versus something very long, incorporate how we're going to revolutionize Gen Z travel, how we're going to focus on authentic and unique experiences, and how focus on making real connections, right, through travel, right? Those are the two or three things I wanted to focus on in the vision statement. And, on the right, what you see is the output, right? So the point of this is, you'll probably have to do certain iterations with the prompting and get to what you want, what you like, but it can be a thought partner for you, right? And so this is the vision statement that I finally picked to become the travel platform of choice for Gen Z, offering unique adventures, authentic adventures, and enabling real connections, right? So why don't we try the same thing for senior citizens now for the product concept that you have worked on, and look at a few vision statements and tell me what do you think of the output? Okay, again, any questions on the exercise, or is it clear? And again, what you are building is a new kind of social networking app focused on seniors, right? And so you want to come up with a vision statement for that product. Okay, I see nothing in the chat window, so I guess you guys don't have any questions. And let me know once you are done. Just share your prompt, share your thoughts on the output. Okay, so there is one example. Yeah, I think that's a good one. What do you think, Parimal? Are you happy with this? Do you think it needs to be refined?
Yes, I think it needs to be refined. So I also want them to connect in person based on their location. Say somebody
Yeah,
who is staying few houses apart and we share the same interests.
yeah,
So that is something. And another is the safety factor. Like since they are senior citizens, so
yeah,
safety will be of utmost importance. So those two aspects I would like to add in that vision.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can actually then iterate on the vision and you can give it those specific inputs and have the vision statement focus on those aspects that you think are the most relevant.
Yeah. So
Okay. Silver Social. Cyan mentioned Silver Social, building a vibrant online community. Yeah, that's a good one.
So, one quick question, sir, here. Yeah.
Yes.
I was just trying to search and see if there are any specific GPTs which are built which can do kind of thematic analysis on the interviews, whether it is the text based or on the voice, or we give the interview chat, so that because what I personally felt was if you do a thematic analysis and it gives us some kind of a diagram, which is the most tough bit or the most time consuming job for product manager, we could use those thematic analysis prompts to generate these vision statements and products, and also for future planning of what needs to go in, what should not go in. But are there any kind of readily available thematic analysis tools which can do that kind of a proper thematic analysis of the interviews right now with GPTs?
What do you mean by thematic analysis tools? Sorry, what do you mean by thematic analysis tools?
So the thematic analysis is essentially you basically split the interview text and then you basically generate themes out of them, and then you basically pick out specific statements which validate those themes, and from there you basically generate the ideas, right? So what are the problem statements, and what for those problem statements what could be the generated. So it builds kind of a map of the entire thing what you have been talking to, like say 10-20 customers, and then you can keep on adding to it and then basically keep on defining. That becomes kind of your board on which you have your pain points and top pain points listed and the ideas to solve them. And you use them, basically those statements itself, to then generate your vision statements and your marketing statements. So that kind of a board can be, is there something like a specific GPT available, is what I was search.
So I think you're referring.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to check how we are doing on time and whether you guys are able to stay back for a little bit, because I think we are running a little behind. Okay, great. Seems like most of you can, which is great. Thank you so much for the flexibility. And again, apologies. I just had an internet outage. Talk about Murphy's Law. Had to happen at this time. Okay, I'll share my screen again. So let's just continue. So we were talking about vision statements, right? And you guys, of course, actually had some thoughts on the vision statement. And sorry, I think I was answering the question about thematic analysis and creating visual outputs like mind maps. So I would say that, like, maybe worthwhile searching if there's a tool like that exists. I won't be surprised if it does exist because there's so many AI tools out there. But in terms of basic synthesis of research notes into, like, what are the top insights, and then creating visual outputs like wireframes, we already saw that earlier, right? So that's something, you can do with the tools that I mentioned. But do search for it and then see if a tool can create a mind map as well, and the outputs, the specific output that you want. Okay. So good. So I think, what we did was create a vision statement. The next step, what we'll do is we'll create a roadmap. Okay. And no surprises here, the roadmap as well, right? And again, the more effective your prompting is, the more details you give it, the better the output in terms of the roadmap it will be. Okay. So here is a prompt that I gave. Hopefully you can see my screen, right? Just checking.
Yes, Kapil.
Okay. So this is the prompt that I provided, where I said that, okay, these are three key themes. If you remember, authentic, unique experiences, budget, and social sharing and validation. Come up with a roadmap, and you can be very specific in terms of the output that you want. So I said, create a table with 2 columns, theme, feature, and categorize the feature into what is a must-have feature and what is a delighter in the roadmap. Okay. And then this is the output it did give me. So as you can see, pretty nice looking roadmap. You have the themes on the left, then you have the specific features in each themes, and a categorization on the priority. Okay. Now, one of the things you'll notice is these large language models, their output looks very good. Their output looks very confident, but you also have to review it carefully to make sure that there's nothing that's missing. Like, for example, in this roadmap it created, it was missing the social feed feature, which is, I think, very key feature that we want to build in this app, right? So then I give the second prompt, which is, I said, refine the roadmap to include that feature in the third theme, which is the social sharing theme, right? And it can then update the table based on that prompting. So my point is, make sure you carefully review the output. I always use the output from these tools as a starting point, as a thought starter, but I do review it carefully and I add my own thoughts as well. And then you can also segregate or prioritize the roadmap across quarters, right? So let's say that you're building this app and you want to have a multi-quarter roadmap. You can segregate this roadmap into the 2 quarters, for example. And I said that in first quarter, I wanted to focus on budget-friendly theme and what are the must-have features in the authentic experience theme, right? And so with that prompt, it did create that table. I think the formatting was a little messed up, as you can see. It's not really one table, but that's okay. But it did create what is in quarter 1, what is in quarter 2, and what are the features that will go in quarter 1, for example. Okay. So try that. Why don't we just take a minute or so? Why don't you try that for the senior citizen product that you're building, social networking, and then tell me what is the quality of the output that you see in terms of the roadmap it generated. Okay. So let's just try to take a minute or so in the interest of time, minute or 2, so that we can move on to the other exercises as well. Again, any questions on the exercise, feel free to ask me.
Kapil, we do have a question. I think Vijaya wants to ask a question. So Vijaya, I think you can go ahead and do that.
Amazing to see how we right from product ideation to problem statement, product ideation to roadmap. Now, everyone can use the same, everyone can do the same, like make use of AI to do that. Then how do we differentiate, how a product can differentiate from others then?
Yeah, good questions, because everybody has access to the same tools, right? So, and I think that's where I think your own thinking, your own creativity, your own prioritization will come in, right? So as I mentioned, think of it as a starting point, right? It can actually help you create the first version of the roadmap. It can help you think of features which you may not have thought of. It can also help you synthesize and get your thinking structured in terms of what are the key themes. But I think one of the things I've seen is it really struggles with prioritization. And it does some prioritization. It is confident, but is it right prioritization? And I think that's where product management, the craft of product management comes in, the judgment comes in, triangulating multiple data points to say that this is what's really important. I'm going to focus on this comes in, right? And of course, the whole execution piece, right? Where you have then work with various stakeholders, align. Think of this as, and that's why I think this is not a replacement for the product manager. Think of this as a powerful assistant that you have, as a junior analyst that you have, who can actually help you, create a lot of these things. But then you have to use your own judgment, your own thinking, your own strategic ability to refine the output. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. And I think, keep an eye on that as you're generating these various outputs in these exercises. Keep an eye on that as a product manager. Are you satisfied with the output, right? Or is it 60% there and it still needs 40% more work in terms of refining it?
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So what do we think? Any other sort of inputs on this, on the roadmap? Any observation? Guys, remember this is a workshop, so I want you to participate and tell me.
So, Kapil,
There
hi,
is no
Shweta
right or
here.
wrong answer here. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Shweta here. So, one of the understanding from this is that, it's kind of like steering us towards one direction. Okay, so my question is that, isn't it almost there on your lap kind of a thing? Because sometimes what happens is when we're doing so much of research and analysis and all, right, we might take time to reach a particular point. So, it's kind of giving us a leeway to not do too much of research. Is that what it is? Because if you see the second one, right? Now segregate the roadmap into quarter and add quarter column to the. So that's how we have said, which could be taking time for us to come there, or rather, yeah. So how do we distinguish the the ask versus the direct, what do you say, alignment to what we're thinking towards the direction that we want rather than what it is saying? So the prompt has to be very clear and careful also, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because here if you say, if you've put update the table and then you've given extra directions for it to follow rather than you asking the feedback or whatever it is, right? So we have to be very clear on exactly what we want it to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will cover some of the techniques when it comes to writing effective prompts. It's basically the quality of the input determines the quality of the output, right? So the more clear your prompt is, the better the output will be. But I think conceptually, I see what you're saying, and I think similar to the previous question that we're asking these AI tools to do the work for us. What is our value add? What is our differentiation? Are we getting biased by the output it is creating? And again, I say that think of this as one of the inputs. Let's say that you have a peer, you have a colleague in office, and she's also a product manager. Think of ChatGPT as her, and you can discuss that. Hey, this is the problem that I'm working on. This is the initial idea of the product. This is the roadmap that I have. What do you think? Right? And so, your friend or your colleague might also provide some inputs, right? To think of GPT as one of the inputs, right? But like I said, use your own thinking, use your own understanding of that specific segment and problem statement in refining it, right? You can also do the reverse, by the way. You can sort of have your own problem statement. You can have your own roadmap. You can have your own vision, and you can ask GPT or Gemini to critique it, right? And you can try that maybe after the workshop. That's something I also do. I ask it to ask me questions, right? Based on what my output is, what I'm thinking about, right? So it can also function as a thought partner for you versus just as an assistant, right? And it can help you sort of refine your thinking about the specific problem you're working on.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the thought partner, I think probably that I should be taking into account. Meaning now, yeah, you're right. So now that what we are doing, right? I mean, at least what I'm doing is pretty much an ask and tell kind of a thing. So probably, yeah, you're right. So if you also ask questions, or you prompt it to ask questions, then that will actually give us more, thought. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and it can be surprisingly effective, right? It can help you uncover your blind spots, things you may not have thought through, right?
Yeah, and it comes from an objective angle. So it's
Yeah.
pretty easier for us to navigate. Cool.
Good. Okay, so let's keep going. I would not then cover all the exercises in the interest of time, but maybe a few more. But one follow-up question I have is, and it goes back to what we were discussing, right? It did prioritize into must-have and delighters, and somebody was asking, okay, is it right? What is our value add? So how do you get more info on this must-have delighter classification, right? How do you know is this the right priority or not? So one is, of course, you do your own research and get data points, get input, survey, focus groups to say that what is really a must-have feature, what's a delighter feature. But the other thing you can also do is you can ask GPT or Gemini to give you the rationale, to give you the justification as to why it prioritizes features into must-have and delighter category, right? So at a very high level, the broader point that I'm making is you can ask the model to explain its thinking as to how it arrived at that output, right? And you should also try that, because that will also give you at least an understanding of how the model is working and how it is saying way, right? And that can also help you with some input in terms of the prioritization framework it used in coming up with the roadmap. Okay. So let's just keep going. Maybe let's just do a few more exercises and then we'll wrap up. But I want you to do try some of these in the coming sort of minutes. So the next one is execution, right? And I think a lot of you in the survey as well did mention that PRD creation, or maybe at least coming up with a PRD outline, is something that you use these tools for. And I think it was one of the highest, most common tasks that you use GPT or Gemini for, along with creation of marketing content. So why don't we create a PRD? Okay, so this is the example from the travel segment that I have, right? And what I said was create a PRD for the social feed feature, right? Specifically for that feature. And it did put together a pretty nice PRD, I would say nice outline. Started with some context in terms of who is the TG, what is the pain point we're addressing, what is the overall objective of this feature. Then did create high-level features and epics, and within the features, it did create user stories and acceptance criteria, right? Which is nice. So every feature was structured, every epic was structured like this. And it did create also key success metrics, right? For example, engagement, content creation, retention, all of those success metrics for me, which was nice. It did create some technical requirements as well, right? I think fairly generic, I would say, but again, like I said, it's a starting point for you. And then some dependencies and put together some sort of a timeline as well. Okay, so when I look at this output, I think this is a good outline. It does tell me what are the key sections I should actually have in the PRD. It does have an initial content in the PRD, which is a starting point for me, but definitely there is scope for improvement, right? And that's where you as the PM would actually come in, right? So why don't we again just take a minute to try this out, create a PRD for, pick one of the features in your senior citizen social networking app example, and ask it to create a PRD for that feature. Okay. Any question on the exercise that we know? Yeah.
Hi, Kapil. Kapil, this is Nitin Lekwar. Sorry, I'm not very much familiar with the ChatGPT or any other tools as of now. I'm a very
sorry, I can't hear you very well. Hello?
Hello? Hello,
yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah, this is better.
Yeah. So I was saying I'm not a very familiar person from the ChatGPT or AI perspective. But whatever you have just mentioned in the workshop with respect to these examples of the travels example, every time I have the same question repeating in my mind that this is a very generic domain. So the answers or probably the feedback which ChatGPT or GenAI is giving is very much applicable. But what about the domains like a capital market or portfolio management or investment banking, which is very much, very much specific to that particular firm or that particular entity. So, like, because at that time it will be very much specific to the entity and the entity domains. So,
yeah. So I think your question then is like, how do you then, generate good output and like, have an effective model in a very specific domain like finance or even healthcare, for example, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's a good question.
Exactly.
I think that's where, if you remember the stages of LLM development, there was fine tuning, sorry, there was pre-training, then there is fine tuning, and then RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback. The fine tuning stage, the second stage is where you can actually solve for those kind of use cases. So you can actually, once you have a base model that's developed, which is generic, then you can fine tune it for a specific vertical. So you can give it lots and lots of training data for, let's say, finance, and it'll become smarter on the finance world and understanding the various financial terminology and capital markets and all of that stuff. Or you can do the same thing with healthcare as well, right? And so think of it that way, like you have a base model which is already trained on vast amounts of data, but then it can be fine-tuned in a less expensive manner, less costly manner on a specific domain as well. And a lot of enterprises who are actually, I think, doing POCs and testing with these models for their enterprise use cases are actually taking a model like an open source model, and then they are fine-tuning it with their own industry context, right? And that's how they are actually using it. So your question is absolutely right. There are various techniques which can be used to verticalize a model for a specific domain. And I think companies are sort of like, doing that already.
So I'm sorry if there is one supplementary or probably just from my clarity perspective, I'm just asking this. So what you're saying that how like the ChatGPT is currently the generic in the nature, which is very much pretty available for everyone, every individuals. But if we talk from the company perspective, company will modify or probably like prepare something for their specific entities, and then they will use that ChatGPT from the company's specific point of view, right? So it will be like
yeah, in many cases, I would say in many cases, because companies do have their own specific context, their own specific data which they want to train the model on. So in many cases, companies would do that. I'm not saying all. In some cases, maybe the generic model can also work.
Okay. Thanks, Kapil.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I didn't see a lot of like, inputs, or maybe I missed it. But the point is that, you can use it to create an initial version of the PRD, right? And, of course, you can think of additional improvements as the product manager, and you should definitely. It's just a starting point. Here are some other things that you can do. Try it yourself after the workshop. We would not do it in the interest of time, but you can ask it to create user personas. So for example, for your senior citizen segment, you can ask it to create some personas. And that will also be helpful in communicating the requirements and who you're building for to the tech team. Always a good practice to do that. As I mentioned, you can also use it to create designs. Now, there are different tools out there, and I'll cover those tools. We saw the example of creating wireframes from text inputs with the Figma plugin, but there are also tools which can create full designs for you. And then you can also create test cases, right? From a QA perspective, right? So let's just quickly talk about the last step in the product lifecycle, which is launch and iterate, right? And the first thing is, you can ask these LLMs to create segments within your TG, right? So in this case, in this example for Gen Z, I asked her to create 2-3 key segments for which I'm building this product for, and just help like write a summary of what these segments would be, right? So it did create these 3 segments: explorers, social connectors, and budget conscious planners. And it was a nice summary and a nice tagline as well for each of these 3 segments, right? So helps me think about how should I market the product differently to different segments in terms of what appeals to each segment, right? And then I can also ask it to create an email campaign. So this is all go-to-market, right? The product is ready to launch, you're launching it, you want to build awareness. And so it can create like, different email campaigns with sort of different value proposition, different taglines, which will appeal to different segments for you, right? And it can also draft an entire email body. For example, this email is for social connectors. And as you can see in the body of the email, what can you expect? It did talk about the features which are actually relevant for social connector segment and not all the features for Wonderwell, right? So this is again something you can try in your like spare time after the workshop. In the interest of time, we'll move on. But the point is, you can plan a lot of this marketing content and create this marketing content and take the help of large language models to come up with that. And by the way, I think marketing content was the second biggest use case in terms of how you guys are using these tools for, other than PRDs. You can also ask it to create social media posts. For example, here is a Instagram post that created for a specific segment. You can ask it to create a PR or a media kit, and it will write the entire press release for you, like in terms of announcing the product to the world, right? With the overall headline of the press release, the key features, quote from the CEO. I mean, it makes all of that up. Of course, you have to fill in with the right information, but like I said, it's actually something that you can build upon. Okay, so again, we would not do this exercise in the interest of time, but if you were to take one thing from this, you can also use these tools to create go-to-market content, positioning content, collateral, press release, social media posts, email campaigns, etc. Okay, and last thing I would say is you can also ask it to come up with an A/B testing plan. Right? So you can say that, hey, I'm launching this feature. I'm launching the social feed feature. And then it can create an A/B testing plan in terms of what are the key parameters you should test the feature on. Maybe like vertical feed versus horizontal feed, video-based feed or image-based feeds, for example, right? And it would come up with like, something, and also what are the key metrics that, you should test as part of the A/B testing. So this is the one exercise that I want you to do. Okay, and Harleen, if you can just share the Excel or Google Sheets link in the chat window. Okay, so now this is, imagine that you have launched the product. Now this is for the travel product, right? And you have some data, 6 months of data, right? So if you open the sheet, Harleen actually has shared the link. You have some data. Now I want you to use GPT or Gemini to analyze the key insights, analyze this data and extract the key insights. Okay, so everybody should have the link in the chat window. Just open the sheet, copy paste the data, and ask the model or the tool to summarize the data for you and tell me, like, what you see. What does it tell you?
Hi, Kapil. While we work on that, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned some tools to generate, say, high fidelity outputs or high fidelity prototypes. Can you enlist some of them?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Just hold on to that thought. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you some links to useful resources.
All right.
Okay. Are you able to access the file? You will see data, for 3 segments. Okay.
Yes.
And you'll see various types of data in terms of engagement data, booking data. And remember, this is for the travel booking product. So this is not for the senior citizen example. Yeah. So just copy and paste the data and ask it to give you the key insights. And you can type in the chat window what you think, or if you want to speak, you can also unmute yourself and tell us what your observations are on the analysis. Okay. Any volunteers? Anybody wants to share?
Yes, Arvind, thanks. Hi, Kapil. My question is regarding the legal aspect of this entire process of using AI for product development. So whatever you discussed so far in the lecture today, it mostly helps us do our work faster. So be it research, be it ideation or development on our ideas towards the launch. Whatever Gen AI has generated, that more or less helps us perform our work better as a product owner. But if we generate some image or some vision statement, some dialogue from the AI or some thing that we want to directly use as part of our presentation, as part of our website, or a name. So, is there any legal aspect that we need to take care before using anything that is generated by these kind of tools? That's my question.
Good question. Good question. Yeah. So I think I would say the short answer is yes, you should. If it does come up with a name, let's say Wonderwell, you should definitely check if there's another company which has a trademark on that name. If we talk about image, I mean, there are these AI tools which do say that the image is free to use. So you should just definitely check the terms of use, especially if you're commercializing that image and that product. But a lot of this input that we have is something that you can use to build your thoughts on. I think this is not something which is sort of like copyrighted in that sense. But when it comes to images, video, names, you should definitely check. And overall, I would say this is actually a very hot area in terms of how content either used as input in training the model or as output. What is the legal implication and what is it that should be allowed to use? For example, there's a lot of debate going on in the music industry. There are these models which can create music for you, which are trained on vast amounts of songs. Now the artists are saying that they should be compensated because their songs are being used for training the data, right? And of course, these tech companies have a different view on that, right? So this is something which is very evolving, I would say. And I would say that for your specific case, you should definitely check, especially if this is something that's going to go out in the market in terms of a real product and a real name, to make sure that from a copyright and trademark perspective, you're on the right side of the law.
Yeah, thanks, Kapil.
Okay, sure. So what I'm going to do is, let's just try to wrap up now. I think we have gone through the entire life cycle, and I do want to cover 2 or 3 key things before we end the session. So as you saw, I mean, these are very, very powerful models, right? They actually have knowledge of the entire world. In that sense, they're probably even more powerful than a human, right? In terms of the knowledge that they have and their reasoning capabilities. So imagine, you have access to a brilliant mind like Elon Musk, right? And so what would you ask him? And, you're only limited by your imagination and what you want to ask and how you're going to ask. So what you get from that interaction will be based on the quality of the question that you have, right? And this is what I mean by prompt engineering, right? The quality of the output that you have from these models is directly influenced by the quality of the input, the quality of the prompt. And there are a lot of different techniques in prompt engineering that you can read upon. But here is sort of one simple framework that I like, right? And we use some parts of it in the session today. It's called the create framework, right? So very quickly covering this. So you should tell the model what role you want the model to play, which is the character. For example, you're a seasoned chef, or you're a product manager, or you're a travel journalist. Give it that persona, that character. Then, of course, you have the exact task. So in this case, in this example, I wanted to generate an Indo-Japanese fusion recipe. Okay, that's a request. So the more clear you are, the better it is. Then you can give it some example. You can say that, draw inspiration from famous chefs like, Mr. Atushi Kohara, right? Or maybe scientists like Einstein or Stephen Hawking, depending on the context you have. Next comes the adjustments. You can give it some extra information to shape the result. For example, in this case, the recipe, you want the model to list the measurement in imperial units. You want it to use a creative tone in coming up with the answer. So you can give all of that adjustments as well to really shape the output. And then, you can give it information on the format in which you want the output. And we saw an example, in our examples rather, I wanted to generate a table, or it can be a JSON file, or it can be maximum 10 bullets, or it can be a title followed by 100 words maximum in the paragraph. So the type of output, the format is also very important. And, you can use extras to get a better output. For example, ask me questions about the ingredients I prefer, and it can really tailor the recipe based on that input, right? So think of this create framework as a way for you to design your prompts to get better output. But here are few techniques that I would say, best practices. Aim for clarity. So the more clear the instruction is, the better the output would be. Give the model time to think. If you have a very, very complex task, rather than giving everything all together, give it time to think, ask it to do things step by step. For example, you can give it the context and you can say, in step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, right? And it will generate a better output for you. Then there are things called chain of thought prompting for complex reasoning tasks. For example, if you wanted to use math problems and science problems, and these models are becoming better, by the way, but you can give, examples in terms of how to reason through those examples. And it will look at those examples and also generate more accurate answers for you, right? I would not cover this in detail. You can look it up, but use chain of thought prompting, especially for more complex reasoning tasks. Use personas. I already covered that. It adds a unique dimension to the output. Ask the model for justification. As we're discussing prioritization, you can ask the model to say that, why did you prioritize this feature as a must-have? Why did you prioritize this feature as a nice-to-have? And then lastly, you can also provide reference text. You can give it some additional text which it should refer to, so it can refer that text in generating the output. And sorry, this is the last point. Use it as a thought partner. And what I mean is, don't think of it as just an assistant. You can actually ask it to ask you questions. And we were talking about this, right? You can give it your current thinking, and then you can ask it to ask you questions on that thinking and help you refine your thought process as well. So these are very, very powerful models. And one use case, of course, is doing a very specific task for you, but use it more and more as a thought partner. Okay. So as we saw that, you can use it across all the stages, right? And so what does the future look like? This is one, I think this is a tongue-in-cheek comment. It's a bit humorous. It's, probably, this guy didn't really mean it. But, you can read through the post. This is a tweet. But interestingly, this tweet was written in December of 2022, just 1 month after ChatGPT was released, right? And he's talking about how product manager might work in the future. And I would say, it was written a long time back, more than a year back. But the future might have similarities, with what he's talking about, where you're using these tools extensively across the various lifecycle stages of the product, and you're using them as an assistant, as a powerful tool, as a powerful thought partner for you. Okay, so these are the survey results. I'm going to skip this because we don't have much time. So I'm going to skip the slide. But I just want to talk about two main things. What are the trends? And then I'll end the session with some useful resources for you. Okay. So what are the trends? Where are things headed now? Okay. This is again one funny take in terms of the wrong direction which things are taking. I'll let you read the post. But on a more serious note, there are, I think, 6 main trends that I want to talk about. Right. The first one is multimodality. Okay. So the models, when ChatGPT was launched, it could take only text input. Now the models are able to create and consume input across a variety of formats: text, images, computer vision, and audio. It can even detect the tone, right? So these are becoming multimodal. The second key trend is they can do very, very advanced reasoning, right? I don't have time to play the video, but this is an example from the latest version of GPT-4o, where the person writes a math equation on the piece of paper, and GPT-4o, based on the vision, it can actually nudge and guide this user in terms of how to solve that math equation, right? So they can not only take inputs from multiple sources, but they're becoming more and more advanced in terms of their capabilities. And the last thing is falling costs, right? Cheaper, faster, better. So these models, if you look at the cost of GPT-4o versus the previous version, and even Gemini, it's continuously falling. This is cost per 1,000 tokens. And there's a 50% reduction in cost between the latest version of GPT and the previous version, which is GPT-4o and Turbo, right? So these models are becoming cheaper, faster, and better, right? And then if you look at the size, we talked about how these models are very, very large. And of course, there is that push that these models are becoming bigger and bigger in terms of more parameters, in terms of more number of tokens and context window. But at the same time, there is also this development on the other side of the spectrum, which is these models are becoming smaller as well, right? And so a lot of companies like Microsoft, Google, they're releasing these smaller models, which are trained for specific tasks. And the benefit of this is they can actually run locally on your device, on your laptop, or on your even smartphone. Like Google released Nano, which can run on your Pixel 8a, and it can do various things on the device without the need for internet connection. And of course, it will be faster. But they're meant to do specific tasks, and hence these models can be smaller, right? So you have both the sides, the models becoming bigger and bigger. At the same time, you're coming up with these smaller, more efficient task-specific models as well. So that's one trend I think we'll continue to see. And then the next one is, as I mentioned, things are actually evolving very, very fast across the stack. You have the applications at the top, you have the models in the middle layer, and you have the infra, where you have the cloud providers and hardware providers like NVIDIA and their GPUs. So one of the school of thought is these models are becoming more and more similar. They're looking very similar in terms of output. The performance levels are almost the same. Even open source models are catching up to the closed source models in terms of performance. So the models are becoming commoditized. And hence, if you look at the value might be captured at the highest level of the stack, which is the application layer, right? And that's where the next killer app, or the app which actually has the proprietary data, which nobody else has to train the model, might capture most of the value, right? So that remains to be seen, but that's how the story might be unfolding. And then the last thing is rise of autonomous agents, right? So autonomous agents you can give them a broad goal and they can do several tasks for you end to end, requiring minimal intervention from you. For example, there could be an autonomous agent in the future where you can say that, just book me an Uber. And then it will figure out what questions to ask you, how to do that, maybe optimize on pricing, the time you should leave, etc., right? Or it can ask you, you can ask the agent to place a food order for you, right? So the thing is, from going from one specific task to doing a complex set of tasks, achieving a broad goal is where the future might be, right? Remains to be seen, but a lot of work is actually happening on this front as well. Okay, so those are the key trends. Apologies, actually went through a bit more quickly, but I'm just going to end the session with sharing some key resources with you. So here are the tools, the AI tools, which you guys can use. Some of this, we actually covered today. Now, please note that I have not used all of these tools. This is based on sort of my research and understanding and talking to people in terms of what they might be using. But these are some of the, I guess, more commonly used tools by product managers. So for UX research, there's a tool called Zeta.io, which helps you synthesize your voice of customer and customer feedback across various channels, whether it is customer support calls or reviews and so on and so forth. For wireframes and design creation, these are some of the tools. We used one of them, Wireframe Designer, in today's session, but there are others like Visibly, use Galileo and UIZ as well. Then there's Notion. Those of you who use Notion, there's Notion AI, which helps you keep track of your various product artifacts, meeting minutes, etc. There are some analytics tools which can help you analyze data by asking a series of questions, as opposed to creating the charts yourself. And then there are productivity tools as well, which can help you take meeting notes, generate images, even generate PPTs for you. By the way, full disclosure, I did not generate this PPT using AI. The PPT was created by me, but I did use one of the images which was AI generated. Okay, and here are some of the resources for you. And what I'll do is I'll just copy paste the link in the chat window. But here are some courses. The course from Andrew Ng from deep learning. He's a celebrity when it comes to machine learning. So he has a course on GenAI free for everyone to take. You should definitely do that. Then there is also a simulator, which I really liked, which is focused on PM's use case. And it's very hands-on. You can try that. Helps you get a better understanding of how we can use GenAI. And then there's some explainer videos and articles. If you want to go deeper into how GenAI works, how LLMs work, you can look at those. There's a nice article from OpenAI on prompt engineering and best practices there. And then at the bottom, I've listed a newsletter and a couple of books, which I would recommend you guys to read, right? So I will copy paste this in the chat window right now so that you don't have to. So hopefully everybody should have the link now. and you can paste it for reference. And I think that's it. Thank you. I really enjoyed the session. Thanks for all your participation throughout. I'm sorry that we actually ran over, and sorry about the disconnection in between. But here is where you can reach me. My email is there, my LinkedIn is there. And then I have a few slots where somebody can reach out to me and book a slot with me if they want to talk about anything on product. So you can book a slot with me. I'll again paste the link in the chat window. But yeah, that's it from my side. I know we are actually over time, but if there are any quick questions that we want to take, we can do that. But yeah, over to you, Harleen.
Kapil, very quick one question I have.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just pasting the link in the chat window.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm sorry, though we are running a timeout, but this is a very big question running in my mind from long time. As I said, I'm a very functional business analyst working from last 18 years in a different domain. Can you just guide me with respect to whether do I have to pick the any technology from the future perspective, or a product management project management? Which one option I should pick from the future perspective?
It's hard to answer that question. I can't give you a short answer. It really depends on your context and your background. But I think happy to chat offline. Of course, there are a lot of emerging technologies. AI definitely is really the hottest one. Everybody is talking about it, and I think it's here to stay. This is not a fad like what we had with like NFTs and Web3. I think this is definitely here to stay. So I think this is definitely an area for you to develop your skills on and be relevant and stay up to date. But I think it really depends on your specific context and your background, what you're interested in. It's hard for me to answer that question in a very specific manner for you only. Okay. Any other questions that I can answer? I'm also going to look in the chat window to see.
Kapil, Swaroop here.
Yeah.
So I've been using the paid version of ChatGPT capability to develop an app. I'm like, okay, develop the app, the wireframes. What would be the process to actually build the app? Can AI build the app as well, or does it just tell us where to go to build these apps or what to do?
Yeah, so good question again. So again, disclaimer, I have not used these tools extensively, but there are a lot of tools which help you create an app as well, or at least a starting point. They'll write the code for you. So there are these like low code or no code tools. There is builder.ai is one of them, but there are a few others as well. If you just search online, where you can use AI to kind of create these apps for you. Not only the designs and the wireframes, and then of course they let you then customize for your specific business case and workflows as well, right? But like I said, I have not tried building an app like that, but I know a lot of those tools do exist.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I'll book a session with you to take you through what I have done so that I can get more guidance.
Sure, absolutely. I think we'd love to have that chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kapil. And also, is there a comparison? I mean, I'm a bit confused between Gemini and the ChatGPT 4.0.
Yeah.
Is there a tabular comparison between the two, GenAI versions somewhere where I can?
Why don't you? Here's a fun thing you can do. Why don't you ask Gemini or ChatGPT to generate that comparison for you? But yeah, on a serious note, I'll give you like 2 or 3 points, right? First of all, these models are becoming more and more similar, right? They're trained on the same data. They have the same size in terms of parameters, right? And similar kind of data that they're trained on as well. In some cases, they might have access to some proprietary data. Like, for example, Google has struck a deal with Reddit. And they're going to pay a licensing fee to Reddit to use their proprietary data, which might give it an edge. But I'll tell you this, right? They're becoming more and more similar. And I have used both of them, and probably like you guys also have used in today's session as well. I personally don't see a lot of difference in the output, right? Earlier, if you talk about several months ago, there was a difference. I think ChatGPT was better at more creative content creation compared to Gemini. But Google is also catching up. They're not going to be left far behind in this race as well. And if you look at the latest version and the latest releases, both of them actually have this vision and the model, which is not just text-based input and a chatbot, but basically it's your assistant all around you, looking at what you're looking at, helping you reason through things, helping you guide through things. And it can detect your tone. It can see that you're not in a good mood. It can see what you are seeing. For example, a math problem, it can guide you. So even the next evolution is becoming multimodal and complex reasoning. And these models are starting to look very, very similar, right? Of course, that version is not released on in the markets. I haven't tried it. But what I have tried, I have found them to be more or less similar, if you will. But do try it. Ask it to generate a comparison. Maybe ask both of them to generate a comparison and then see if you see any kind of a bias in either ChatGPT or Gemini. Yes, I'm just reading through that in the chat window. Yeah, so I did mention there is a newsletter called Superhuman AI. Okay, it's a nice newsletter because it does cover the latest developments in AI. I think they release it every day. And they do cover the latest development news. Also, they do actually have a section where they talk about the latest AI tools. So that's a nice one. You can read through it. I did recommend a book as well, a couple of books rather, which you can read if you want to get a slightly better understanding of LLMs and how they work. And also, how we would coexist with these AI models in the future. And the last thing I want to say was, yeah, I think do subscribe or read the blogs from major tech companies like Google, Product Blog, OpenAI, Meta, because they keep blogging and keep releasing new enhancements to these models. That's also a good way to kind of keep track of what's happening. And then lastly, I mentioned a website called there's an AI for that.com, where you can also just search for a specific AI tool that you're looking for. For example, somebody was talking about, is there a tool which helps you create a mind map based on text input? So you can use that website to search if a tool like that also exists. Yeah, does that answer your question, Parimal? Great. I don't see any further questions now.
Yeah,
Arlene,
it
I
does
think
answer.
over to you.
I was on mute.
Great. I think we shall wind up now due to time constraints. Thank you, Kapil, for delivering such a wonderful workshop. I have had great takeaways, and I'm sure everyone here has too. So thank you for giving us your time and sharing all of this information and knowledge with us. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.